Welcome to the 4 parks of Universal Orlando Resort, featuring the new Universal Epic Universe. With spectacular hotels, we offer a week of vacation excitement. Visit universalorlando.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party, as well as the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. With us is our esteemed colleague and friend and co-host, Eric Levine. Eric is a noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. And I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Gentlemen, I want to begin a discussion because it's constantly breaking news. Every day brings new developments. But I want to talk to you, gentlemen, about Israel's war against Iran's terrorism. So let's get it straight so everyone truly understands what's going on here. Iran is the paymaster for, the trainer, the supplier of all the proxies that have waged war against Western civilization, the American-led world order, and the Israelis. As far as Iran is concerned, the little Satan is Israel. Next up on the block is the United States. They have infiltrated all over the world, including Europe, the United States, South America. It's a serious crisis. It all began when a naive young president named Barack Obama decided to go into a nuclear deal and give them money and give them the right to go forward and to fund terrorism and to not have a absolute guarantee that they wouldn't have nuclear weaponry. That was Obama's contribution to the destabilization of the Western world. What he led the door open for was a fundamentalist cult of Islamic fundamentalism, which is dedicated to hegemonic ambitions to subvert the world to their worldview, even at the price of war, death by the sword. Consequently, we're in a world in crisis. Now, Biden only continued this. He and his vice president only continued this by giving more money, walking away from Trump, who tried to protect America by walking away from the false premises and the false deal, which was never a treaty, by the way. It was supposed to be a treaty, but Obama snookered the members of the Senate. It should have been a treaty. It was only an agreement. Trump walked away from it. It was starving them out. They didn't have the resources to fund terrorism, and now we're in a war against terrorism. Israel's done quite well recently after the October 7th butchering, the savage attack against innocent civilians, the rape of women, the torture and beheading of people, putting babies in ovens. After that, Israel responded. They went after Hamas and have been successful. They're going after Hezbollah, decapitating Hezbollah. They've responded when America would not, responded against the Houthis. So that's what we have. We have Israel's war against Iranian terrorism. But it's far from won. And the problem, of course, is the Biden administration, every step of the way, is trying to restrain Israel. And is very unhappy with Israel for not giving them heads up about their next military moves. And I respectfully submit that the Israeli government is absolutely right not giving the United States a heads up, because all the United States does is try to hamper them and leak information. Eric, your thoughts?
Well, let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back to 2008, when the year Barack Obama was elected. He didn't take office until 2009. In 2008, under UN resolutions, Iran was prohibited from enriching any uranium. In 2008, Iran was prohibited from developing a ballistic missile system. In 2008, it was an economic basket case. In 2008, it was a very unpopular regime. Now in 2009, Barack Obama becomes president. And from that moment forward until 2015, when they entered into the JCPOA, Barack Obama worked assiduously to appease Iran and work towards the nuclear deal. That explains in large part why immediately upon taking office, he undid the anti-missile systems that the Polish government and the Czech government had put in place, because they were put in place to prevent an Iranian ballistic missile attack. So he took those down as a step towards appeasement towards Iran. People don't talk about that a lot. They talk about America should live up to its commitments. Well, America agreed with Poland and the Czech Republic that we would deploy these anti-ballistic missile systems. But Obama undid them unilaterally. And he brought down a government in the Czech Republic in so doing. People wonder why he didn't push Assad out when he went on his heels during the Syrian civil war. That was because Assad was Iran's closest ally in the Arab world. So as an appeasement towards Iran, he saved Assad. That's why he allowed the Russian, that's why he never enforced his quote-unquote red line, because to enforce the red line would be to punish Assad for using chemical weapons against his own people. But the Iranians told him that if you push out Assad, we're not negotiating with you anymore. And there are other steps along the way. In 2009, when Obama was first elected, the Iranian people took to the streets chanting, "Obama, Obama, are you with us or are you with the Nazis? Are you with us or are you with the Ayatollah?" And Obama remained silent. And he allowed the Iranian regime to crush, both metaphorically and literally, the uprising. They beat people to death in the streets. And Obama remained silent. Why? Because he was working on the appeasement of Iran and entering into the JCPOA. In 2015, when we entered into the Iran nuclear deal, what did it provide? First, it created a legal path to a nuclear weapon. To the extent that John Kerry and Barack Obama and their sycophants went up to Congress and around the world claiming that it blocked a path to a nuclear weapon, it was a lie. It created a legal path to a nuclear weapon because it lifted all restrictions on the enrichment of uranium by the year 2013. What was also part of the JCPOA? Iran was allowed to now develop a ballistic missile system, which they had previously been prevented from developing. What else did it do? It gave the Iranians over $100 billion in sanctions relief so that they could use that. We were told it would go to build schools and bridges. We knew it was a lie then. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt for the moment that they actually moronically believed that they were going to build infrastructure like schools and roads and bridges and airports. We now know that over $115 billion went to fund Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, their entire terrorist network around the globe. We're not just talking about the Middle East. We're talking about in Venezuela. We're talking about in Argentina. We're talking about on every continent in the world. So Barack Obama saved the regime, funded the regime, and passed the JCPOA. And what the point of that was to move American Middle East policy from an Israeli-centric policy to an Iranian-centric policy, or at worst, create a bipolar force in the Middle East where the Iranians and the Israelis would have to duke it out and neutralize Israel dominance of the Middle East. Why we wanted to do that? I won't go to anybody's motives, but let's just say it was insane. You have a democratically Western-oriented liberal democracy in the Middle East and Israel that shares our values, that fights our enemies. Their enemies are our enemies. Their allies are our allies. Their values are our values. And we bring into the mix and the empowerment of Iran. So what was their goal? What has been Iran's goal since the inception, actually, of the Iranian regime, but was put into hyperdrive after the nuclear deal? It's to destroy the Jewish state of Israel and to force the United States out of the Middle East and to become the hegemonic power in the Middle East, to become the sole dominant power in the Middle East. So in 2015, when Obama entered into JCPOA, he put that into hyperdrive. Trump comes in and he withdraws from the JCPOA, and all of a sudden now Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis are having trouble finding funding. Because the Iranian strategy to destroy the Jewish state, to destroy Israel, isn't by launching bombs or marching troops into Israel. It's to create what they have called this ring of fire. The Israelis have a 7-front war. They have Hamas in Gaza. They have Hezbollah in Lebanon. They have the Houthis in Yemen. You have terrorist organizations in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. That's 4. You have terrorist organizations in Syria is 5. Terrorist organizations in Iraq, that's 6. And Iran is 7. Israel is fighting a 7-front war against the Iranians. And the Iranian goal is to defeat Israel through a war of attrition. Death by 1,000 cuts. October 7th changed that because it was no longer a cut. It was a shot in the head. And the Israelis really had to fight back. So the Israelis, as they are fighting back against the Iranians, they're fighting back against an Iranian nuclear weapons program. They're fighting back an Iranian ballistic missiles program. They're fighting back against the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. And why does Joe Biden, when he becomes president, again starts to appease Iran? Remember, the Israelis were talking about now retaliating against the Iranian nuclear facilities. And Joe Biden publicly stated that he is against an Israeli attack against the Iranian nuclear facilities. And why would he say that? It's insane. Everyone should be cheering the Israel. First of all, we should be doing it. It should be the United States leading that charge. But to the extent we don't want to do that, why would we want to prevent the Israelis from attacking the Iranian nuclear facilities? Because a provision of the JCPOA, the nuclear deal that Joe Biden wants to go back into, and Kamala Harris wants to go back into, provides that if the Iranians enter the nuclear program, that the United States will safeguard that program against Israeli attack. So the Israelis, to the extent they're going to be allowed, quote unquote, to retaliate against the Iranians, the Biden administration is trying to move heaven and earth to prevent the Israelis from attacking the Iranian nuclear program. Because if they attack the Iranian nuclear program, the policy of appeasement is now irrelevant. Because the whole point of it is supposedly to put the nuclear program into a box. Of course, it doesn't put it into a box. It creates an explosion. And this is what this policy of appeasement has led to. There's a direct connection between the Obama policy of appeasement that the Biden-Harris administration has picked up and that the Harris administration will continue, that has direct line to October 7th, direct line to Hezbollah launching rockets and missiles into Israel, a direct line to the Iranians trying to establish a Lebanese-type government in Syria from which they can launch attacks against the Israelis, and a direct line to the Iranians trying to overtake, and they already dominate Iraq, but to completely control Iraq. That's what appeasement gets us. That's what, quote-unquote, de-escalation, that's the 21st century term for 20th century appeasement means. And that's why we're here.
All right. Jesse, I want you to begin this, and then we'll pick up with you again at the beginning of our second segment. But what are your thoughts about Israel's war against Iranian terrorism and the whole appeasement approach of Biden and Harris is begun by Obama? How's that working out for the free world?
Well, it's obviously not working out well at all. And in fact, it has shrunk American leadership on the global stage. It has, our allies are questioning us. Our enemies are emboldened. And I don't know how much more I could add to two great analysis that both you and Eric have put forward. But I think that what our listeners have to understand is that this Obama, Biden, Harris policy of appeasement, it's being funded by the $100 billion that we released. Just think about the monies that America and the Obama, Biden, and Harris way of thinking and their philosophies, their administrations have been undertaking, are funding these numerous attacks upon our allies. They are funding directly against our armed forces, over 200 attacks on U.S. armed forces in the region. Those monies are being used to in part, and I'm assuming here, and just as an assumption, it's being used to carry out assassination attempts in the UK. With the MI5 just came forward and identified 22 assassination attempts that are being backed by Russia and Iranian forces. And also, these monies are going to Russia to fight our allies in Ukraine, whether it be in the form of drones or whatnot. One constant failure, a policy failure of foreign policy that has gone through all the ranks of history since the beginning of society has been appeasement. And we are forgetting what appeasement led to us with Hitler. And on the dawning of World War II, we allowed Hitler and Germany to run roughshod over Europe, and only into our intervention did we begin. We knew this was coming. They are using our funds against our allies and our U.S. servicemen, and they're destabilizing the region, and more importantly, our allies that were part of that Abraham Accord, or the allies that we created, especially under the 4 years of President Trump, are now questioning our commitment to freedom, liberty, and our agreements with them. Appeasement is something that has been an utter failure throughout history, and we're seeing it blow up, literally blow up in real time. And soon it will be coming to our doorsteps.
Thank you, Jesse. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, essayist, and commentator Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a moment with more interesting and important conversation.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
In golf, precision is everything, on and off the course. PGA of America chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business for smooth operations and seamless transactions. Together, we enhance ticketing and concessions for better fan experiences from gate to green. This is pro-level efficiency. This is PGA of America with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at StitchFix.com/Spotify. That's StitchFix.com/Spotify.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Build professional skills this semester with Adobe Creative Cloud and create standout work both in and out of the classroom. Save big on professional creativity tools. Students get 65% off Adobe Creative Cloud, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, Acrobat Pro, and 20+ creative apps. No matter what project you're working on, Adobe Creative Cloud apps can help you take it to the next level. Visit adobe.com/student to learn more.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back on Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Well, Jesse, I want to ask you this question. Given what you and Eric and I were talking about in the first segment about Israel's war against Iranian terrorism and the appeasement formula of Obama, Biden, and Harris, and that doesn't seem to be working out for Western civilization and free world, I submit to you the following. This may be the most important election of our lifetime. In fact, I think it is. And I want to ask you your opinion on that, Jesse, as well as, are we better off today than we were 4 years ago? And is America safer than we were 4 years ago? To your mic, Jesse.
First and foremost, let me add the last two. Are we safer than we were 4 years ago? Absolutely not under the Harris-Biden administration. Are we better off than we were 4 years ago? Absolutely not. And that's been demonstrated economically. But let me give you the perspective of a political leader. And listen, every year, a political leader or political organization candidates come to the electorate or come to their supporters and say that this is the most important election there is. I said this to the voters and the supporters of our campaigns in 2023 because we had a moment in time to change the course and direction of the county of Suffolk, and the election of Ed Romaine as the first county executive in 20 years was the most important election here in Suffolk County. But I think that if you look at us as a nation and through the American history, I can point out to 2 other years where this is would rank up there with the importance of a generational election. 1860, obviously with Abraham Lincoln, 1980 with Ronald Reagan, and I do truly believe 2024 with Donald Trump. The reason being is because almost in all those cases, everything, the country in 1860, the country was divided. It was on the brink of civil war, and it engaged in that. But if you look at 1980 and 2024, our place as a national power was questioned. Our enemies were running roughshod on Americans and the United States. Our people were being taken hostage. Our threats were not being adhered to. We were a failure on a diplomatic and foreign affairs sake under President Carter. Economically, inflation was through the roof. The debt was through the roof. There was an economic upheaval here in the United States, and we're facing that all today. Everything that we faced in the 1980 elections, we are facing in 2024. Americans are not better off than they were 4 years ago, and they're not safer than they were 4 years ago. They're not safer on a national scale from a foreign, from a global state. What's scarier now, though, because of the far left policies that have taken over the states, blue states like California, Illinois, here in New York, and I'll give an example, like cashless bail. We're not even safe in our own neighborhoods and our own communities. An unchecked, an invisible border of the southern border has allowed rapists, murderers, those who threaten us like terrorists to come over unchecked. And what we're doing is we're harboring these people through sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. That is making our communities, not unsafe. Economically, unemployment is sluggish. Employers are not hiring. Everything costs 20% more than it did 4 years ago. Your grocery bills, your electric bills, your car insurance bills, your mortgages, your interest rates are still high. It's difficult for businesses to gain capital. It's difficult for people to be able to buy the American homes. And our wages have gone down. This has been a calamity. These last 4 years have been the utmost calamitous part of an ongoing process that's been going here. In the last 16 years, the Democrats, Obama, Biden, and Harris, have ruled this country 12 years. It was only that respite in the 4 years of Donald Trump. And whether we like his mean tweets, we like his attitude, or we like the way he conducts himself, his policies economically, from a national defense point of view, diplomatic, his approach to our enemies and his approach to our allies and holding people accountable, that's what made America strong again. That's what made America respected again after the Obama, Harris, Biden apology tour that commenced in 2009. I've been hearing it from people in the doors, even here in Suffolk County, which is a strong county economically. We have good, strong prosecutors like our district attorney, Ray Tierney. We have a strong legislature that's for the taxpayers, and of course, we have a strong county executives and legislatures and DAs in both counties here in Nassau and Suffolk in the region. But I will tell you, I am hearing from the doors that even the middle class families here in Suffolk County, they're getting behind in their bills because of the cost of living. So I do share with you, unfortunately, for America, for our middle class, for our people, that we are not safer than we were 4 years ago, and we are not better off than we were 4 years ago. An extension of these policies that have gotten us here under Harris and Biden and Obama will cripple this country to the point where I'm not sure if she's ever going to come back. Because what we have on the ballot this year is a choice of either voting for freedom, liberty, the Constitution, and our founding fathers, or, as Harris and Walz want to take us, and the Democrats, they want to have us become a nanny state. They want to take us to the progressive left. They want to bring a socialist society here where it's grounded in censorship, where the government runs industry, and where the government runs the lives of individuals. And I'm hoping that very silent majority that propelled presidents like Nixon and others and Reagan will come forward again, and I'm confident they will, because when we have a choice, we're going to choose of our founding fathers and American exceptionalism.
Very well said, Jesse. I just want to raise 2 points, and then I'll turn this over to Eric. Number one, Tim Walz, who's the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party under Harris, has just come out and said, right before I got into the studio with you gentlemen today, that he's for abolishing the Electoral College. Shows no understanding of history, shows no understanding of a framework of the Constitution, shows he's never read the Federalist Papers. He doesn't understand the significance of that. It means all public policies will be done by a straight so-called democratic vote, which means in terms of a vote, you just ally New York values, California values, Illinois values. You get those people. They will dominate national elections, and they will impose a progressive agenda all across America. There will be no federalism. There will be no balance and checks against an extreme control by the federal government of public policy, economics, freedom of opportunity. The progressive agenda, I respectfully submit, gentlemen, is destroying America from the inside. It has to be stopped. But if the Electoral College is abolished, game is over for a free and safe America. Eric.
Yeah, just picking up on that point, then I'll address the broader question. I mean, of course, when the Constitution was put together, there was this quote-unquote grand bargain. And part of the grand bargain was to try and bring in small states and large states so that small states wouldn't feel dominated by the large states. Rural America wouldn't feel dominated by urban America. And if you do away with the Electoral College, California will be dictating policy to Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska. You know, why somebody sitting in Los Angeles is going to be deciding farm policy in Nebraska is going to be somewhat anathema to people in Omaha. So, I mean, by the same token, Delaware has 2 senators and Florida has 2 senators. Should Delaware have the same number of senators as Florida under the Walz concept of how America should be restructured? I don't know the answer to that, but the bottom line is that was put in place precisely as part of the grand bargain to make America work, to have small states be willing to join the Republic and join the United States and feel secure in the fact that their state will not be just consumed and dominated by some of the larger states. But that's just to that smaller point. Is America safer today than we were 4 years ago? Anybody that watched the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan knows that America is not safer today than we were 4 years ago. That was the signal that America was weak and in retreat and was unwilling to defend its interests abroad and the American-led world order. You can draw a direct line between the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And keep in mind, when Putin was circling Ukraine, people were encouraging Joe Biden to put sanctions on Russia while they were encircling Ukraine. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to wait. And then just on the eve of the Russian invasion, Biden blurted out, a small incursion will be, a minor incursion will be okay. In other words, it would be okay if Russia invades Ukraine as long as it's not too terrible. We'll look the other way. And then when the Russians did invade Ukraine, what was Biden's first response? It was to surrender. Always remember that the first thing that Biden did was to offer Zelensky a ride. Zelensky said, I don't want a ride. I want bullets. If Zelensky hadn't stood firm, Joe Biden would have caved and surrendered, and the Russians would dominate and control Ukraine today and be threatening our NATO allies. And then, how is Biden prosecuting the defense of Ukraine? He's always a day late and $1 short. The Ukrainians say we need X, Y, and Z military systems. He'll think about it. And then he'll say yes, and then he'll drag his feet in delivering it, and then tell the Ukrainians how they can use it. They fight the war in a way to ensure that they won't lose, but Biden wants to make sure that the Ukrainians don't win. Of course we want the Ukrainians to win, but not Joe Biden, because that's his concept of de-escalation. He's imposing the same restrictions on the Israelis. He's slow-walking military hardware to the Israelis to allow them to, quote-unquote, defend themselves, but he doesn't want to allow them to win. That is one of the reasons why he always said to the Israelis, don't go into Gaza. They ignored him. They went in. It was the right thing to do. don't retaliate against Hezbollah in Lebanon. They've retaliated in a big way. It's being very successful. They ignored Biden. They did it anyway. And that's why, notwithstanding as hard as Biden is trying to persuade the Israelis to not retaliate against the Iranians, they're going to retaliate against the Iranians. They're ignoring him. The United States has been put in a position where neither our friends nor our enemies respect us and listen to us. The Chinese fly a balloon all the way across the nation, from Alaska to South Carolina, where they finally shoot it down. The balloon goes just miraculously. The winds blow the balloon.
Coincidence. Must be a coincidence.
Over every military base installation in the United States. It's amazing how the wind just blew it that way. But the Chinese are buying up farmland against right next to military bases and important critical assets of the United States, and Biden does nothing about it. Well, these are messages that Xi is picking up on. He understands it, and if I'm in Taiwan, or if I'm in Japan, or if I'm in the Philippines, I'm really, really worried because the United States is really weak. Is the United States safer today than it was 4 years ago? No way. No way. Are we better off today than we were 4 years ago? I don't think so. I mean, Jesse made a lot of that case. The one point I want to bring out, though, 2 points I just want to bring out, though. I think 1860 has to be put in a completely different category than every other election, because that clearly was the single most important election in American history. The election of Abraham Lincoln was the single most important presidential election in American history. More Americans died during the Civil War to keep the country together and to defeat slavery than all other wars combined. And but for Abe Lincoln and his belief that the Union has to hold together and to destroy slavery, we would have two countries. There'd be a North and there'd be a South, and America would not be the global power we are today. America would essentially have been destroyed. That was the single most important election in American history. And if we can survive the Civil War, we can survive what's coming up. But I will make this other point. What's on the ballot today between Trump and Harris, it's MAGA versus progressive. And I don't know who's going to win. It's 50-50 right now. It can go either way. But my prediction is that if Trump wins and MAGA wins, then the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is going to be decimated. The Democrats are going to wake up and say, this sprint to the left is bad for us. We need to get back to the center. Enough of this progressive garbage. If the progressives win, if Harris wins, the Republican Party will come to the realization, well, maybe MAGA is not so wonderful. Maybe we can't win with Donald Trump, no matter how many times he says he's a winner. So I'm not sure who's going to win, but whichever side loses, if it's the Democrats who lose, I think the progressives and their agenda will die. And if Trump loses, then I think the MAGA wing of the party will start to drift into the distance. Well,
that's a compelling thought. I don't know if I agree.
Well, then you would be wrong.
Well, then, of course. I don't know if I disagree.
So I would be right.
So I reserve judgment like I used to do when I was on the bench. All right, we're going to take a break. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, and Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. We'll be back in a moment. We'll be joined by our special guest, John Chachas, a noted investment manager, expert on the media, a good friend who's been on this show before with Jesse and with me. And we look forward to chatting with John in just a few moments about the media and the problems and issues facing America today because of the media. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is Let the Record Show.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss. Oof, like wind in your hair carefree. Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree. Yes! Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree? He's on a roll now. Spit toothpaste on the faucet. You got it. You got it. Peanut butter on the light switch. Oh, spritz, spritz. Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back. Use as directed.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Hey, let's talk about your expense report.
I didn't submit an expense report.
You will. Custom saddles and dog training services are not within policy.
What are you talking about?
SAP Concur uses advanced AI to audit and automatically detect out-of-policy expenses. It's the breakthrough I needed to focus more on our future.
These are my future expenses?
Yes, and self-defense classes are out of policy.
I'll need self-defense classes?
You will.
For what?
It's a big dog.
SAP Concur helps your business move forward faster. Learn more at concur.com.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. We're back with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, and we have the honor and privilege of bringing back one of our favorite guests, John Chachas. John is a noted businessman, managing principal of Methuselah Advisors, is an investment bank and capital partners. He's an expert on the media. His group also owned Gump's, a very famous department store. He's been involved in network and media coverage. He knows media. So when John spoke to me a number of days ago, he raised the question he wanted to talk because he's very upset about what's going on in the media. I'll let John submit his own premise, but my thoughts were, I think the media is biased. I think the media doesn't tell us the truth. I think there's a price to be paid for this media distortion. I think it bewilders, confounds, and upsets and alienates our people. And I think there's a price to be paid for our institutions. And I think the best example to my mind of that is a whole disinformation campaign that was created against Donald Trump with Russia collusion funded by Hillary Clinton, the Democratic Party, and the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop. And our friend Miranda Devine exposed that, and then it was suppressed by the media because you couldn't get the true story yet. But those are my thoughts, as humble as they may be, John. I turn over to you. It's your mic.
Well, I have a quite let's stay above the fray for a second and just ask ourselves the question: if we have a contested election in 2024 based on the heat that's in America on each side of the political aisle, who's here today who can actually call it and say this was the outcome so that the people of this country have faith in their democratic institutions? That, for me, is the real failure that has emerged with respect to enterprise journalism. When we were children, you had ABC, NBC, and CBS as licensed broadcasters. You had no cable networks. You had no Fox News. You had no Newsmax. You had no digital news apparatuses. You had three guys, Chet Huntley, Walter Cronkite, and I'm going to forget who at the moment was on ABC.
Eric Severide.
No, ABC was Howard K. Smith and Harry Reasoner.
But you had a sense in the country that these institutions were above the circus. They spoke a little different, each one of them, but they were above the circus. We now know today, to your point, everybody has a point of view that the media is no longer reporting in the public interest, but is part of the circus. And the real problem that's going to emerge for Wendy McMahon, who's the head of the news apparatus at CBS, or Rebecca Blumenstein, who's the head of NBC News, I think ABC's has changed about 3 times, so I don't know who's running it now, is that if we have a contested election, meaning we have 3 states that are going to determine who has 270 electoral votes and is becoming the president running the country, and those states are probably within 20 or 50,000 votes, you have a real problem if the media has been calling it one way
and then the outcome is different because no one has much faith anymore in the institutions of media. That's a real problem. That's a much bigger threat to our democracy than, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or any person. And that's my big worry, which is the politicization of our media apparatus away from being a reporting apparatus and being part of this mess creates real risk. I think you could end up with a country that is so fractured and so angry and doesn't really have any belief in the outcomes. I mean, whether you like or don't like Donald Trump's assertions about the 2020 election, doesn't matter. It's in the rearview mirror. But we have a new one coming up. And I'll just say this. Those major news organizations that are publishing and on every Sunday, putting up on the air the estimates of who they think is leading in what swing states and so forth, they better get it right. They better get it right. Because on the evening of the election or the morning after, if suddenly, Harris was leading by 4 and then it's a Trump win by 2, or Trump was leading by 3, I mean, you're going to have hell to pay in the country. And it really worries me about the stability of the country. That's really my worry.
My problem, John, is this. I have no confidence they can do the job. I think they all pick their sides. They all have an ideological or political bias. There's either Trump adoration or Trump hatred, and most of the media has Trump hatred, obsessively so. I think the interview at 60 Minutes where they literally whitewashed her comments and then had a voiceover by the narrator, and they edited out what she actually said, is an example of a taint, a bias by them. I think another example, a recent one, John, also troubling, you had a very pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist interview on CBS, and you had a journalist who tried to do his job, and then he has to go now on an apology tour because the management and the groupies at CBS said, how dare they have a hard-hitting interview with this guy who is pro-Hamas and pro-terrorist. I mean, that's what troubles me, John. I'm not sanguine that they will do their job. I don't think they have the intellectual capacity or the moral compass to do the right thing. How do you solve that?
Well, the statute that governs the licenses, all of ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, anybody that has a licensed broadcast. So this is different than CNN, MSNBC. Obviously, the cable networks have no such constraint. They are a pipe. They will spew whatever they think will generate a rating. But ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox are governed by the Communications Act, and the language is they are to broadcast in the public interest. And at some point, it seems to me that Brian Roberts is the controlling shareholder of Comcast NBC. Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, which owns ABC. Sherry Redstone was the controlling and still is the controlling shareholder at the moment until her transaction closes of Paramount Global that owns CBS. And, of course, the Murdoch family controls Fox. These people better think of something larger than their own egos. And, look, I hear you. You don't have confidence, and you've just validated the very point I've made, which is I think the vast majority of Americans, if you hired a research firm to really poll them and ask them, do they believe that they are broadcasting fairly above the fray, the answer would be today, it's probably the lowest point in the history of American broadcasting in terms of how people think about the integrity of American news apparatuses. But it is and has been an essential piece of the stability of this nation for 2 centuries. And we could see at the end of this election cycle a very, very close election in a handful of states. And if the reporting is wrong, if it just turns out, oops, gosh, Nevada didn't go blue, Nevada went red, or Pennsylvania we thought was red and now it's blue, and only by 20,000 votes. Unless there's a credible reporting apparatus, I think you risk real instability in the nation and real permanent damage to our electoral our electoral
John,
institutions.
I agree with that. But let me just throw out one more thing before I turn this over to Eric and then Jesse. If you're counting on the FCC to do the right thing, to do their job, how the hell did they allow George Soros and his family to take over 200 radio stations, which totally blocks out a countervailing voice in this country? You can have 200 more stations propagating left-wing ideological propaganda. And the FCC let them off the hook in terms of procedure to let them do that by. What are your thoughts on that?
The FCC should have delayed the approval of the transfer of those stations until after this election and eliminated that particular risk. I agree with you 100%. I mean, I don't know that there's any basis under which the law would permit somebody to say, oh, sorry, George Soros can't own a broadcast asset. He's not fit for it. But in terms of the timing of it, they certainly could have said, we're just going to wait until after November for you to influence what.
And that was a straight Democratic Republican vote at the commission that allowed that to happen.
As it always is.
Right.
As it always is.
Eric.
Well, John, thank you. This is some great insights. So I just want to come back to your observation that these television media outlets are supposed to air in the quote unquote public interest. It all depends, I guess. It's definitional. I mean, what's in the public interest? You have some government drone who's overseeing these entities, Fox, CBS, ABC, and they think it's in the public interest that Trump loses. So you go say whatever you want is against Trump. Maybe you have somebody who thinks that it's America's public. It's in public interest that Harris loses. Now, it always seems that the bias at CBS, NBC, and ABC are always against Trump. But how do you, even if you're enforcing the concept of airing in the public interest, how do you define that?
Well, let's start with numerical data. All of the broadcasts on all of these networks, all of their transcripts are publicly available. You can make a request and you can get the actual transcript, every single word that's spoken by, whatever commentator is on the air. And with technology today, it takes you about 15 minutes to set up a set of questions to determine what percentage of their time on the air is devoted toward one party or the other. It wouldn't be very hard to set up, fairly neutral questions and to actually measure it. And if you measured that today on all four of the networks, Fox, NBC, CBS, and ABC, I think what you'd find is that they are no longer reporting equally. Once the fairness doctrine was exterminated in our laws, these enterprises don't have any duty in their mind to report in a fair and balanced way. They report one side of it or the other. And I don't think anybody could look at that and say that's in the public interest. The question is, at some point, will somebody challenge their licenses and take them to court and ask the FCC and the courts to actually invalidate their licenses? And I don't think that's likely to happen. I really don't. But I stand by where I was, which is, I hate to say it, I hope this election is a blowout on one side or the other. I hope there's 340 electoral votes in somebody's column, whoever it is, because I think the nation, really going all the way back to Gore Bush and the fights over the integrity of our votes, it's really dangerous stuff. And your point is well taken, Eric. It's not easy to determine what's in the public interest, but over our long history, what was in our public interest was that licensed media sat above the circus and wasn't part of the circus. And there's almost no one that believes that exists anymore.
Well, I agree with that 100%. I mean, but the concept of stuffing ballot boxes or election fraud isn't really new. I mean, I guess the best example is 1960. The concept of vote early and often, of course, goes back to Chicago and Mayor Daley in the 1960s. And a very strong argument can be made, and if you go back and look at the facts, Nixon probably won that election. Because if he wins Illinois, he gets his 270. And the reason he lost Illinois was because people were voting early and often in Chicago. And had Nixon, rather than challenging the election, did the patriotic thing and did not, and said, okay, I'm just going to concede. I don't see people, either Trump or Harris, ever being able to rise to that. They'll never do that. You could say horrible things about Richard Nixon and Watergate and all that other stuff, but at that moment in time, he was a great patriot. And I don't see either of these candidates being emotionally, intellectually, or having the capacity to be able to do that.
I agree with you. I think that, and in many respects, it's the entire apparatus that surrounds them. It's become a blood sport where there is nothing you won't do to try to prevent a victory by the other side, even if you damage the institutions and damage the country. And we are right there. And, what really, excuse my French, really pisses me off more than anything is the fact that the media ought to be reporting on itself about these failures. And when I talk to people in the media, and I talk to them often at ownership levels, they know this is true. They know they have lost the faith of the country in terms of their ability to report in an even-handed way, so that the masses in this country hear what happened as opposed to what someone wanted to happen. Your point is really important, which is, nobody's going to concede, which is partly why I started where I was, which is I really hope somebody's at 300 electoral votes. So there's just no question.
I agree with that. I think that's a great point. A blowout, I think, serves the country's interest best.
Jesse, what are your thoughts?
What this is all reminding me of is that famous George Bush bumper sticker that occurred when he was facing Clinton. I think it said, "Piss off the media, vote Bush." I think this year it's going to be "Piss off the media, vote Trump." But I completely agree. I wish I had an answer. I wish there was an answer of how to instill fairness, integrity, and the tenets of the licenses that John has been speaking about. And John, thank you so much. It's always great to speak with you. As an aside, if you want to get a look, or listeners want to get a glimpse into Kamala Harris's America, just look at San Francisco now. Crime is rampant. Unemployment's at an all-time high. We have illegal migration there. Homelessness is out of control. It really looks like a third world country. And this was a city that is literally one of the shining cities on the hill at one point. But what I find amazing is that we all agree with this. And even more so, we have done polling on this issue. The disapproval for the media right now is topping 54% of disapproval on that. Polling is lower than 40% of American people trusting the media. And the failure of the media to hold itself accountable is what's feeding a lot of these conspiracy theories. Yes. In a way, it's almost as if they're feeding into the need and the want for chaos, and that they are able to do that. Think about it. The cable networks' ratings were never higher than they were during the 4 years of Donald Trump.
Well, and the cable networks, as we all know, they're a contract. It's a pipe. There's no regulatory duty to anyone, just like there's no regulatory duty under any of these digital only internet-based news apparatuses that are literally spewing lies. I mean, on both sides of the aisle, just spewing lies and misinforming the public. But that's part of the reason, to me, that the Communications Act is so vital, and that the preservation of some degree of humility and knowledge of their duty to the country. And I have to say, I've spent 35 years of my life buying and selling and helping people who own television stations and radio stations and newspapers. I have never been more demoralized about the way people think of the reporting. You can hate Kamala Harris or hate Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. If you are in the business of enterprise journalism, it is your job to find a way to report.
Well,
I agree with you. And that's why I like about, in the same polling, it said about, and I apologize if I overstepped, but 30%, less than 30% of American voters thinks that the media provides enough independent context to help determine a choice for the independent, undecided voter. But this is nothing new. I mean, we had a couple of examples of stuffing ballot boxes and all that stuff. Let's just go a couple of years ago, where in the 2000 election, CBS ran a major piece on then Governor George W. Bush and a DWI, and I think it was a DWI, or perhaps maybe it was his
it was a DWI.
No, it was a DWI.
It was a DWI.
It was a DWI, which was completely debunked. And they knew, and in the analysis came forward that they actively didn't use their own or adhere to their own standards. But then we just look at what's going on here. And maybe this is where cable news networks on the left or the right maybe are help keep people accountable, because
I don't think they're helping to keep people accountable. I'm going to turn for 1 second to the state of Nevada.
How about this, John? I'm a Republican, so I'll take Fox News. When Fox News identifies the mistakes and the polarizing and politicized biased reporting of a major network, isn't that helpful? When they've done that,
I think on the balance, it is helpful. You're right. There is some role that they can indeed play in this, but they are so grounded in their side of the circus. I don't know that they'll change much. I ran for the U.S. Senate in the state of Nevada 14 years ago in 2010. I grew up out there. I know my way around out there. Nevada recently changed its registration laws. So if you have a driver's license in Nevada, we call it the motor voter law, you will get a ballot in the mail, whether you ask for one or you intended one, which means that the largest proportion of Nevada voters, a state that comprises 6 electoral votes, are unaffiliated. They are not registered with one party or the other, which means from the beginning, if you're ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox or CNN or anybody else, and you're trying to measure Nevada, boy, do you have a tough time, because there's actually more independent, unaffiliated voters in that state than either Democrats or Republicans. And we know that the state is a complicated state. There's 17 counties. Clark County is Las Vegas. Washoe County is Reno. Those 2 counties will always vote blue. The only question is how blue. And every other county will be red, very similar to Texas, where Austin votes blue and everything else is red. But have you had any reporting on any of these networks about how this little state in the West could be, it could actually determine the outcome of the election? And what are those independent voters going to do? I mean, we don't see any of that kind of reporting anymore about Pennsylvania and Arizona and these handful of states, which are really critical. And what the news apparatuses ought to be doing is preparing the country that these are complicated states with very different voting apparatuses, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be, and we may not know until the day of the election. But here's what the current data is that we have. You don't hear any of that anymore. These news organizations don't report that way anymore because they're part of the fight.
Well, gentlemen, I could go on this for another hour, but I've just gotten the sign from the booth that we have to sign off. This is Let the Record Show. We've had the privilege.
I'd be remiss if I don't say that when we listen to the show on Sunday, hopefully the Mets will be one step closer to the World Series. That's all I care about.
The Yankees will already be in the championship series.
Okay. And I just want Michigan football to win. But listen, let's be clear, gentlemen. We've had the privilege and honor of having John Chachas on the show with us, a media expert, financial investment guru, talking common sense to our listeners. I want to thank Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, for being with us. Jesse Garcia, the vice chair of the state Republican Party, county chair of the Suffolk Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We wish you and your families good health and long life, and God bless America. Thank you for listening.
This is Let the Record Show.